Hi, everybody. Welcome to the program. It is going to be a fascinating hour talking about three of the most compelling figures in recent cultural history. Brando, Halston, Lennon. Hot-selling books about their bittersweet, shocking, and sometimes sordid pasts are grabbing headlines today the way these legends have always grabbed the celebrity spotlight. But do these passionate and often painful pages go too far? Well, today, on what would have been John Lennon's 51st birthday, a writer has put together an account of the final days before Lennon's tragic murder. John's allegedly morbid, violent fantasies, his missing diaries, and his supposedly manipulative wife, Yoko. Frederick Seaman, Lennon's one-time personal assistant, charges also that Yoko twice blocked this controversial memoir. But her longtime friend and associate, Elliot Mintz, who will join us also via satellite, tells us why he thinks this tell-all is a pack of lies. Halston. He was one of the world's top fashion designers, but off the runway, he was apparently a deeply troubled man who destroyed his empire with cocaine addiction and a totally obsessive lifestyle that included everything from wild parties at Studio 54 to an alleged addiction to male prostitutes. His rags to riches to ruin story is brought out of the closet by celebrity biographer Stephen Gaines. Marlon Brando, he is a guy who has done all he can to stay out of the public eye, but star historian Lawrence Grobel managed to snag this complex hermit, and he found out about Brando's women, his private island, and the pain inflicted on Marlon Brando by the murder committed by his son a year ago. And what about celebrities who tell their own story? Now, I'm not talking about me, I'm talking about the one and only Supreme, who was a Supreme from the start to the finish of the legendary group. Her dream days as a dream girl were also nightmares, with constant upstaging and eventual abandonment of the group by the diva Diana Ross. In two bestsellers, Dream Girl and Supreme Fantasy, she has shared her side of this story. Please welcome, ladies and gentlemen, Mary Wilson. Come on out, Mary. Look how lovely she looks. Mary Wilson. John Lennon was a dear friend of mine, a guy who did something incredible for me in a charity that I represented here in New York called One to One. He did the last fully rehearsed concert of his life and raised tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars for the mentally retarded. And he was assisted every step of the way by his wife, who was even then a controversial person, Yoko Ono. Now, as I mentioned, there is this very controversial memoir about the final days of Lennon, so controversial that one of the New York papers, when it first came out, put the story on the front page. You can see the New York Post, new book reveals John and Yoko's dark secrets. The author, Fred Siemens. Fred, tell us exactly what your role was. I mean, how do you know the things that you purport to know about the Lennons in their last days?
Well, I was with John almost every day for the last 20 months of his life. I was hired as his personal assistant in 1979, and I was with him until he died in 1980.
What does a personal assistant do? Tell us.
When Yoko hired me, she described the job as cooking brown rice and answering the fan mail, and I learned that there was much more to it. It was a two-part job. Half of it was hanging out with John, being his companion, spending his money, being his conduit to the outside world. The other half was being downstairs in Yoko's office, answering the phones, opening the mail, and doing her paperwork.
Tell us briefly, is the headline correct? Were the last days of John's life before his murder at the hand of Mark David Chapman, were the last days dark days?
I think they were. I think that John was trapped in a loveless and sexless marriage, and that headline that you pointed to sensationalized that aspect of the book, and we're only talking about less than a page in a 260-page book, really. But unfortunately, the media really laps up anything.
Before you attack the media, I've read the book, too. It seems there are quite a few very disturbing allegations in there, for instance, about their chronic drug use during those days. Is that what you saw?
I wouldn't say their chronic drug use. What I say in the book is that Yoko used heroin consistently John, the only drug that he was truly addicted to, from what I could tell, was nicotine. He was a chain smoker almost. He smoked marijuana from time to time. He took psychedelic mushrooms, but he wasn't really a chronic drug user, I would say.
You say that Yoko tried to squash this book, to keep it off, keep it out of publication. Is that true?
That is true, yes.
What did she do?
Well, I had a book deal in 1983 with Simon & Schuster, and at the time I had pled guilty to a count of grand larceny in connection with my taking John Lennon's journals out of the Dakota, and I had pled guilty to one count of a Class D felony, I think it was, and I was sentenced to 5 years probation.
So you are unique among the biographers in that you have pled guilty to stealing the material that perhaps was the basis of your book.
But it was not the basis for the book, you see. My book is based on my journals, and I could document this because eventually Simon & Schuster sued me for fraud, and I countersued them, and I produced to them, I gave them copies, over 1,000 pages of my journals, so eventually they satisfied themselves that my book was based on my journals, and they dropped their suit.
Let me go. We only have the satellite with Elliot Mintz for 10 minutes or so, so I really want to get his side of the story represented right away. What you've heard so far, Elliot, why don't you respond?
Well, it doesn't sound like the John Lennon and Yoko Ono that I knew. I met them in 1971. I've known Yoko now for about 20 years, and I was with John for 10. The last few weeks, months, and year of John's life was one of the happiest of all the possible times. He and Yoko were very, very much in love. They were celebrating the birth and growth of their young son, Sean, who will be 16 years old today as well. They had just completed their album, Double Fantasy. Life was at its zenith and peak. The description that Fred Seaman just gave you of, and the stuff contained in his book is really nonsense.
What do you think of what Seaman says about this larceny charge? What's your view? What is Yoko's view? I know you were speaking with Yoko last night. Tell us your side.
Well, Fred uses the word larceny. Let's just really define what it was that Fred did. Fred stole John Lennon's personal journals, his personal diaries. He took them out of the Dakota without permission. In addition to that, Fred had a warehouse in Midtown Manhattan where when the police arrested him, they also seized a number of other possessions belonging to John Lennon. Stereo equipment, files, letters, handwritten lyrics of Yoko's. Fred Seaman was involved in a criminal conspiracy involving at least 2 other people called Project Walrus. And Project Walrus was in part a scheme designed to steal the diaries and sell them privately. Fred Seaman's time with John Lennon was precious little, and I'm here to suggest that the material in Fred's book on the actuality scale of accuracy between 1 and 10, 10 being accurate, is somewhere between 1 and sliding off the scale.
Fred, speaking as you do from the disadvantage of someone who has actually pled guilty to a felony, why don't you respond to
Okay, first of all, before I respond to that, Geraldo, I would like to make it very clear that Elliot Mintz is a paid publicist for Yoko Ono, a job that he's had for 15 years. He is very well paid for this appearance. It is his job.
He's not being paid for this appearance.
Not by you, but by Yoko.
And I've only represented her for 10.
Excuse me?
I've only represented her for 10, but so far you're running about 50-50 in accuracy.
Let me just conclude that it is his job to attack anyone who says things in public that are perceived as being critical of Yoko Ono.
I'm not attacking Fred. I'm simply
Can I just finish,
facts.
Elliot, before you interrupt me? I didn't interrupt you, and I won't interrupt you, so please do me the same courtesy. Let me finish.
You're right, I'm sorry.
As far as his charge that other things that I had stolen, other things, they are not true. I did have a storeroom, but there was nothing there taken that did not belong to...
Wait a second. I've seen an inventory. Jim Bob, give me the inventory on the full screen,
This was
please.
the inventory supplied to us by the New York City Police Department.
And it wasn't from a warehouse in Manhattan. It was actually from your apartment.
The cops did ransack my apartment.
In Brooklyn.
Yes.
It included video cassettes, audio cassettes, transcripts, Xerox copies of the 1979, 1980 journals, a painting of John Lennon, a drawing by Sean Lennon, 7 manila folders containing notes, correspondence, and writing, musical instruments, stereo equipment.
Okay, can I respond to that in detail, please?
That's a police inventory.
Yes. The cassettes that were taken, they were copies of Double Fantasy. I think they were talking about 2 cassettes of Double Fantasy. The videotape was a videotape called Walking on Thin Ice, which I was involved in the production of. I was in the videotape. The papers that were taken were shopping lists that John had written to me, some of which I reproduce in the book. I forget the other stuff. I've never seen that list, by the way, and this is the second time that it surfaced. On the Larry King show last Friday, Friday some time ago.
Get me the Xerox copy that we have, please, Mike.
And Geraldo, if I might add, there are two copies. There's one list of things of stolen property that were taken from Fred's Brooklyn apartment. There's another inventory sheet taken from the storage facility in Midtown Manhattan, including John's personal stereo.
So, Fred, your book may be totally accurate, but you sit there a convicted thief, true?
I did plead guilty to taking John's 1979 journal.
To a felony conviction.
Yes,
I mean,
yes, I did.
Like you
it's not a secret. It's in the book.
I
I admit it. I explained the circumstances.
You do admit it on the last page of the book, I know.
Not in the last page,
the
in
last
the last
page
section.
before the epilogue.
In the afterword.
The afterword,
Yes.
Yeah. All right, that's not saying that you're a liar. I mean, it's just saying that you're a thief.
I'm not a liar. I'm telling the truth. The book stands for itself.
All right. We've got to take a break. Celebrity bios, penning passion and pain, the focus of this edition of Geraldo. John Lennon, one of the great masters of rock and roll, one of the probably three greats. The book we're discussing right now, The Last Days of John Lennon, a personal memoir by Frederick Seaman, a man who worked for at least 2 years in the Dakota, the fabled building, the scene of Rosemary's Baby, where John and Yoko lived the last, how many years of their life?
I think they moved in there in around the mid-1970s, maybe 73.
All right, you describe, why don't you quickly describe some of the adjectives that you apply to Yoko Ono?
Adjectives?
Yeah.
I think it's fair to describe her as manipulative. I think she used John.
Didn't John love her?
He did, yes.
It seemed to me, let me just say, and I'm going to let Elliot talk, that's really his role, not mine. I saw them 6 weeks before John was killed at 64th Street in Central Park West, right out front of my apartment, and we had a conversation. We hadn't seen each other or spoken for probably 5 years since John had a so-called lost period on the West Coast. And I have to say that Elliot's assessment, at least in my conversation with him on the street, appears correct. Sean, their baby, was a source of enormous joy. Double Fantasy was already on the charts and moving pretty quickly. John, in my estimation, seemed happier than he had probably for 7 or 8 years.
Yes, but you see, Geraldo, the John Lennon that you saw was the public John Lennon. That is what he put out to the outside world. Inside the Dakota, it was a very different picture. It was a very grim picture, and one that Elliot knows to be true, because even though he wasn't there as much as he claims he was there a few times during my 2 years that I was there, he knows that it's true. And, of course, he is paid to promote the myth of John and Yoko as the Romeo and Juliet of the 1960s. But it is just a myth. The reality was very sad, unfortunately.
Elliot?
Geraldo, I won't even deal with that nonsense. The suggestion being that when he met you on the street, he was doing a public relations job in a street corner. All of this is nonsense. What I ask our audience to do, both in television and in your studio, is the following. Pay no attention to Fred Seaman. He's just a guy hawking another book. Pay no attention to Elliot Mintz. He is right. I do represent the Lennon estate, and Yoko Ono is my best friend. I love her and respect her. What I would ask you to do is just this. Listen to John Lennon. His final interview that he did for Archeo General the day of his death, he talked about his absolute love for Yoko and his son Sean. The interview that he did the day before for the BBC, he talked for hours. The David Sheff interview in Playboy magazine published in December of 1980, the same. Either Fred believes that John was an honest, real human being, which I know most of us share, or that John was an absolute total fraud with a woman who he didn't love. The hypothesis is crazy and bizarre. In the end,
May I respond to that?
I'm almost through, Fred, stand by. In the end, it'll be John Lennon's music and his memory and his integrity that will prevail, and Fred will be just another one of a pathetic list of people trying to cash in on John's life.
John Lennon was not a fraud, but sadly, the Ballad of John and Yoko, Double Fantasy, was a fraud. John Lennon, in those last interviews, sad to say, lied. He promoted the party line. The party line was that he was the house husband upstairs with Sean baking bread. Yoko downstairs, the brilliant business brain, you know, making money hand over fist. That is just that. It's a party line. It's not true. I was there. I know it not to be true. And there are others who were there. For instance, Mike Medeiros, Doug McDougal, the bodyguard, my Aunt Helen, who was Sean's nanny, my Uncle Norman. Many people who were there, who were members of the inner circle, know that I'm telling the truth.
Geraldo.
Okay, Elliot, we're going to lose the bird, so this is the last we'll hear from you, so make it good.
Let the folks choose for themselves. Put a John Lennon record on your turntable. Listen to his music, look into his eyes. You'll know the truth.
Okay, thanks, Elliot Mintz. I interviewed Yoko, the last time I interviewed her was on Entertainment Tonight. I think we have a brief clip where I asked her about being the dragon lady, so-called, being this evil influence that destroyed... we can't hear from John on that issue, but we certainly can hear from Yoko. Jim Bob, why don't you roll that clip? This,
Were you ever the dragon lady?
Dragon lady. Well, I don't know what dragon lady means, but dragon probably symbolizes something that is unique and very strong, and if that's what it is, I'm honored.
Well, that's Yoko's response on the dragon lady charge. I'm not... You may briefly one more time, then we're going on to Mary Wilson.
This is the big list of stuff that I...
There's 2 pages. I got another page here.
Reading from this page, at the top it says, Sony video cassette, Badlands. That was a movie. I don't know why the cops took that. 2 Scotch color video cassettes, Beatles. I think that was my copy of Hard Day's Night. Then there was cassette copies of Woman and Walking on Thin Ice, which I helped in the production, and I was in Walking on Thin Ice.
But you didn't own it.
I did own it. I did own it.
Then why'd you let him take it? Well, what about here? Here, you got all these... you have Manila Folder, Yoko Ono, Rough Lyrics, 1974 Manila Folder, John's correspondence from 68 and 69. That certainly doesn't belong to you. A lot of this stuff, by the way, is also fabricated. Yoko Ono's writings, 1974, Yoko Ono's publishing royalties.
That was not found. That was not found.
Why aren't they listed here? Is this a phony?
Yes, it is a phony, and I'll tell you why. Because I was picked up by 2 of Yoko Ono bodyguards. I was beaten by then. I had a gun put to my head. I think you have a photo of one of the cops who beat me up.
If we do,
a police sergeant named Barry Goldblatt, who is a member, still a member of the police force. Later, afterwards, they turned me over to the cops, and that's when I learned that not only were they bodyguards for Yoko Ono, but they were actually New York City policemen. And I was told in no uncertain terms by the detectives at the 20th Precinct that unless I cooperated, they could not guarantee my safety. I took the cops down to my apartment without a search warrant because one of Yoko's bodyguards had the keys to my apartment, and I was told if I didn't take didn't take the detectives down there, Yoko's guys would go there. That's why I took the detectives there. Once they were there, they had like 2 shopping bags, and they just started going through everything and throwing anything in there. And to this day, I don't know exactly what was taken.
Well, that list apparently
indicates... This is not what was taken. Other things were taken that are not on this list.
But Fred, if everything you say is true, then you must have had the worst lawyer in the world because you pled guilty.
Yes, I did.
Pled guilty not only to plead guilty.
I had one of the worst, and I filed an affidavit against him.
You pled guilty to a felony.
Yes.
Lawrence Grobel, quickly. I've got to take a break, but what do you think of the job that Fred's done?
Well, on the show today or in his book? I find it difficult to make a real comment when I haven't read his book, in all fairness to that. I would have a difficulty about taking anybody's material, but then again, I've never had to be in that position. I usually get to be with people and talk to them directly and have it all taped. So it's a difficult one on this thing. I would look at the book and I would at least give it a chance and see if I believed it or not.
Stephen?
You know, I wrote a best-selling book about the Beatles called The Love You Make, and what's really surprising about this is all that information has been told before. It was in my book, it was in Albert Goldman's book. I don't know why it's being rehashed yet again. You know.
So you're critical of Fred's book? I mean, or of his.
Well, now I write unauthorized biography, but I didn't kiss and tell. I didn't work for somebody and then go out and in a cynical way try and make money off of my employment there.
Mary, aren't you glad you wrote your own book?
I certainly am.
We'll hear from you next, honey. Halston, and the Supremes. You're hearing shocking inside stories of pain, passion, and the pages of the hottest celebrity bios. Stay tuned. Mary Wilson is next.
Just hang that cradle, mum and mine, right on that Mason Dixie line, and swing it from Virginia to Tennessee with all the love that's in your weep no more, my lady. Won't you sing that song?
The fabulous Supremes. Mary Wilson, the lady in the middle. You look great. Before we get to Mary's story, just a couple of quick questions for Fred.
Okay, my question is directed to this gentleman here, Fred. Isn't it true that John Lennon left Yoko Ono and her son for another woman and moved in with this lady? Because I seen this on another talk show, so I have to agree with you.
Oh, it must be false then. I don't know.
No, it was. I saw this on a talk show.
She did. They did break up in the mid-70s.
It's true. Yoko, John did break up with Yoko for 18 months and went to the West Coast with May
That was
Pang.
before Sean was conceived.
Yes, and the interesting thing about that is that it was Yoko who suggested to May that she go with John, because this was around the time that John and Yoko's sex life collapsed, and Yoko wanted to recruit May Pang as John's concubine. She didn't realize, though, that May would fall in love with John and that the two of them would run off.
Right, but as Stephen says, that is old told story.
I would just like to respond
You
to
can
his
quickly, and then
remark.
we'll get right
yes,
to Mary.
that he said, Stephen wrote a book called The Love You Make, co-wrote it with Peter Brown, who used to work for the Beatles, and Stephen says that there's nothing new in my book that wasn't already revealed in his book, and I find that remark astonishing in view of the fact that Stephen hasn't read my book, so unless he's psychic...
And I won't
Right,
read your
so
book,
unless he's
and
psychic, he doesn't know that.
It's a suggestion that I make to all people that care about John Lennon.
Yeah,
I got
well,
as far as
did
the
you ever
book
meet
jacket.
John Lennon? Did you ever meet John Lennon?
Yes, I
Okay.
did meet John Lennon, and John Paul George, and
Okay.
Yoko Ono,
Well, if you
and
read my
Cynthia
book,
Lennon.
if you read my book, Stephen...
Wait, who is that lady in the middle? Oh, it's Mary Wilson. Oh, hi.
say
Are you the
something?
author of Supreme Faith and Dream Girl?
Yeah, right.
Oh,
May I say
Sure.
something? In the 60s, it was amazing. The Supremes and the Beatles often had this same battle going on. If we were number one, they were number two. If they were number two, we were number one. So it's still going on today here. So I'd like to say something in response.
How do you feel about Diana now that, you know, in the first book you seemed, in Dream Girls, I guess, came first.
Dream Girl.
Dream Girl, right. Dream Girl. Remember the Dream Girls, the Broadway show? That sort of was a thinly veiled story of the Supremes.
I wasn't paid for that either, but I loved it, though, the play.
You weren't paid for the play?
No.
No. You seemed a bit more pained, I don't want to say bitter, about the fact that Diana left back in 1970 and that the Motown as a company sort of got cool to the Supremes that you tried heroically to keep together. In the second book, you seem a bit more mellow. In Supreme Faith, you're more talking about Mary Wilson's evolution as a woman and as an independent person.
Yes, well, you know, it's amazing. First of all, I'm older. I'm 47 now. And when I...
Take a look at this.
Well, I can't hide. I can't really hide because everyone has those records at home, so they kind of more or less know.
They compare you to the...
Right. But my first book, Dream Girl, was really about, like, the fairy tale existence, you know, and it was still, the pain was probably still there because I was still a lot younger. The second book, Supreme Faith, is really what happens to the characters in this fairy tale. You know, do they really go off happy ever after? And I had a lot of time to really mellow out in my own life and to look at what was going on. However, I want to say, in the introduction, you said something about how I felt about Diane, what she had done, those kind of things. My book is not a Diana Dearest. It's really about the American dream. It's about rags to riches. It's about 3 black girls who were very young, 13 years old. We went off and we conquered the world. And I started out writing about that. And if I were going to end up at writing an honest story, which I think we're talking about here, honest, what we're writing about, whether I write it or someone else write about you, I wanted to write honestly about this fairy tale story that I had lived. And I truly felt that that's what I had lived. However, in sitting down, I had to go within myself and say, well, you know, if I'm going to tell the good parts that everyone reads in the papers and they know that we were all great friends, what am I going to say about behind the scenes? Sometimes we weren't happy to each other, with each other. Am I going to tell those stories? And that's where some of the things I had to say about Diane came out. People say, oh, she hates her. I do not hate Diane. I absolutely love the woman. We actually became Black American princesses together. We conquered the world together. Right? So I cannot hate her. But I had in all honesty, I was 17 when I first decided to write my book. And obviously then I had nothing to write about. My teacher, Mr. Boone, Mr. Boone said, Mary, he says, you must become a writer. Well, all I wanted to do was sing. So when we became famous, I said, I'm going to write about the Supreme. So that's been what I wanted to do all my life. But when I sat down, I said, I have to be honest and write everything. So just because I wrote some things, bad things, doesn't mean that I hate Diane. Because I even wrote about myself some horrible things. Well, okay, we're going to talk about that. A lot of my friends ask me, Geraldo, they say, when you're going on Geraldo's show, please ask him this question. So shall I ask you now or shall I ask you later?
Ask.
Well, no, we're talking about my book. I'll ask you yours later.
Okay,
okay. Don't let me forget now.
You know, I saw the 25th Motown anniversary. I know that you were all reunited.
Yes.
That was about 5 years ago, wasn't it?
86?
Yeah,
83.
No, I think
No.
86 is right.
Time eludes.
Time does fly. Or was it 83? Well, anyway.
Okay.
Is that the last time you and Diana spoke?
It was pretty much the last time.
Well, that's kind of sad, isn't it?
It's really sad. It's really sad. It's one of these things I think we have allowed ourselves to allow the media to invent this feud, and we've fallen into it. Now.
Yeah. Now, you know, the media gets a pretty bad rap, but
it does.
the media didn't stop you from picking up the phone and say, "Hi, Diana. How's things? How's tricks?" Or her doing the same.
Earlier in our career, I kind of fought myself as that being the one thing in our friendship that I never did. I never said, Diane, you know, I feel like this, or Diane, you shouldn't do this, or Diane, I never did that. So I'm pretty much at fault of that myself, yes.
So do you ever miss her?
I miss her every day of my life. But the strange part about it is that I'm very happy with my life today. I miss her only because I think that kind of becoming stars like that only happens to a very few people. So even though I miss it, it has a spot in me, right all over, that it's there, and it's there for me whenever I get down. I go there, and I talk to her, I talk to Florence, but I have my life today that's just tremendous. I mean, I'm no longer the girl behind Diana Ross. I'm no longer the other girl in the Supremes. I'm Mary Wilson, and I've kind of become that, and I'm very happy about that.
Mary Wilson. Marlon Brando, Halston coming up. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
You know, I made Americans believe in American style, and that was a very important thing for them. And the American mood of not only style, but, you know, life on every level. When you talk about, oh, a designer's name, or his label, or his standard, or his signature, or something like that, it really is only as good as the product. And the product itself must sell itself.
Roy Halston Frowick. A man described by Newsweek magazine in 1972 as quite simply the best designer in the world. Who remembers all those pictures of Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis in that little hat, the little pillbox hat? Halston created it. And you know, Stephen, he seems so cultured, so affected in a way, and yet he was a small town boy, wasn't he?
Yes, he grew up in Des Moines and in Evansville, Indiana, but he was very cultured. He learned all of that. He went to Chicago, where he started as a milliner, then came to New York, worked at Lilly Daché and Bergdorf Goodman, and all the great ladies of society went to Halston for their hats. Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis was one of his favorite customers, mostly because Halston and Jackie Onassis had the same head size. And she has a rather large size head for a lady, and he was able to fit the hats on his own head before he brought them to her. And then also he was marvelously talented. He was a brilliant designer.
Tell us, I know he said very often that design is nothing, it's who's wearing the design that's
You're
everything.
only as important as the people you dress.
So who did he dress?
He dressed all the great ladies, Jackie Kennedy, Elizabeth Taylor, Liza Minnelli, all the big society ladies that you can think of. He then eventually went mass market and wound up designing for J.C. Penney.
One of the dear friends of mine, now departed, as so many friends in that business are, Giorgio Sanangelo, the great Argentinian designer, once told me in an outburst of passion how Halston had sold his name.
It's really a sad thing. At the time, you know, it was hailed as a great coup. Time magazine called it Couturier's coup, but it was the devil in Daniel Webster. In fact, in 1973, for what turned out to be a paltry $12 million, Halston sold his name, his company, his trademark, even his design talents to Norton Simon Industries for all time.
He tragically, Halston, again, like so many, died of AIDS. I guess he's been dead about a year and
just a year and a half or so.
A year and some. He had. First, let me introduce another old pal of mine. He's truly one of the great designers. His specialty, jewelry. Kenneth J. Lane joins us, a man who was a great observer of that scene in those days. So, Kenneth, I want you to stand by when I ask Stephen this question, and then you can comment on it. I know you know all the principles involved in this situation. Halston, it seemed, had a kind of a personal style that was personally destructive. He got busted in Central Park for sodomy, male prostitutes, you allege in the book. You allege a lifestyle where he was so addicted to cocaine that when they took apart his telephone in his office, it was loaded with residue from cocaine. That perhaps is one of the ways he kept this coterie of stars around, by being one of the drug dispensors?
No, I never said he was one of the drug dispensers. That's from somebody else's book. Halston was a wonderful man, a revered designer, who had a terrible self-destructive streak. In person, he was so proper and wonderful and very rigid and grand, as we saw in that tape. And then he had this really dark, secret life. And that was part of his self-destruction. But I must tell you, the point that's made in the book is that Liza Minnelli, Elizabeth Taylor, they all saved their lives. They went into rehabilitation centers. People stopped doing drugs. Halston got stuck in 1979. And that's the tale of this book.
Kenneth, do you agree with that?
Well, I haven't read the book, so it's hard for me to comment on that.
Comment on the man and his life.
I did read the index, though, and I'm delighted that I wasn't in it. I think everything that I've just heard is absolutely true, as far as I know. We were never really close friends. I mean, I knew him. I knew him since his Bergdorf Goodman days, professionally.
Late 60s.
Yeah, and I did go to his house, as everybody in the world did. He gave a lot of parties. They were terrific parties. I think he was terribly spoiled, and that was part of his downfall. I think without their meaning to hurt him, the Norton Simon people spoiled him to such a degree and put him in this area on Fifth Avenue, which is unlike any other office in New York, particularly any other designer's office. It sort of set him apart from 7th Avenue and the camaraderie of working with other designers, so that most of the designers felt apart from Halston, and Halston felt apart from them. So that this, you know, when he sold his business for $12 million in whatever year it was, that was not a small amount of money. And I sold my business once, and I bought it back. A lot of people have the choice in life, whether they're going to sell a business, a store, a house, whatever, and then you can't turn back. I mean, you do it because you want to do it.
Is it my imagination, or has the era of the celebrity designer passed? You seldom hear about their social exploits the way we used to.
Celebrity designers. I mean, Calvin Klein is certainly a celebrity designer.
But you don't read about Calvin Klein out late at night. It was surrounded by wild partygoers.
He's married now, but I mean, I think the era of party going and the whole Studio 54 thing that Halston represented, he was a central figure of a very, very glamorous time in New York City. And that's why you read about it. I mean, towards the end of the 70s, Halston was one of the most famous people in America, not just designers, but including movie stars and all the rest. And I think that whole thing is gone, unfortunately, in one way, and I think it's a good thing in another, because it was also a period of tremendous decadence and permissiveness in New York. And Halston also epitomized that.
You know, I was going to add the same thing. I have a lot about the 70s and the late 60s in my book as well. And that was a time of decadence. I mean, that was a time of overindulgence for a lot of people. And I think a lot of people did fall down by the wayside because of that.
You know, just one quick question, Mary, before the commercial.
I'm not going to tell you what I want to ask you until
No,
later.
no, you can tell me later. You can tell me in the dressing room if you want to. We'll be chaperoned appropriately. How did you feel when Diana Ross insisted that they change the name of the group from the Supremes to Diana Ross and the Supremes?
That's part of the hurt that you felt in the book. And it was a hurt because I felt we started as a Supreme, and that's where it should be. However, after I got over the initial personal hurt in it and put myself second and put what we were all about first, I realized it would make us more money and that Diane was out front and that perhaps she did deserve that. So that was a personal hurt, but I have two sides, so I can understand that, but I was still aware that professionally, yes, we had to do that. But yes, I was hurt.
One of the most...
I want to say not against her.
Not...
It was more not wanting me to sort of, you know, still be myself. Some dignity there.
You got plenty of dignity there, and class, too. Got to take a break. We'll talk about the man whose son was involved in one of the most celebrated murder trials of recent times. Marlon Brando is next. Stay tuned.
Moved from the area of it being the Marlon Brando Godfather movie star trial to the Christian Brando trial. My son is portrayed by the Carrion Press as the Mad Dog Killer, because that picture has been run to death. There is another view. There is another Christian.
Marlon Brando, the distraught father. Look at the difference between that picture and this. Here is Brando as Stanley Kowalski, I guess, in Streetcar Named Desire. Stella. Perhaps the greatest English-speaking actor in film ever, says me.
And me.
And you too, Larry?
I agree with you.
Now, this interview, I'm curious. When I read your book, and it starts with an interview that you were trying to get back in 1978, and as far as I can see, it's that series of interviews over a 10-day period conducted out at Brando's Islands in Tahiti, around Tahiti, that formed the basis of his participation in your book. Is that accurate?
Right.
Why wait so long? That's, I guess, the question.
The interview I did originally in 1978, Brando had agreed to do an interview for Playboy magazine because Russell Means, who was in jail at the time, the Indian
American
activist,
Indian leader.
He bailed him out. Hugh Hefner asked would he bail him out, and Hefner did. Excuse me, Brando asked Hefner. So Brando then agreed to sit still for an interview. It was the first time he was going to talk to a journalist in any depth for 25 years. Truman Capote did it during the making of Sayonara, and after that one, Marlon didn't talk again. So I was very lucky to get the assignment. I had just done a few people like Streisand and Dolly Parton, whatever, for Playboy. And I went to Tahiti. I spent 10 days with him. When I arrived there, I got off this small plane, and there he was, dressed like an East Indian holy man, and he picked up my bag and led me to this hut, and all the way I'm following him, I'm thinking, Marlon Brando is carrying my bag, and I can't believe it, you know, I mean, because Brando meant so much to me, as he does for so many of us. And for the next 10 days, I spent with him. We had breakfast every day, we had dinner every night, we had lunches when he would eat lunch, and I got to know him on a very intimate level.
Two quick questions. One is that resort of his open to the public?
Yeah, it has been open to the public. Not too many people go. There's not too much to do there, and if he's not there, I mean, basically...
He's the basic tourist attraction.
Yeah.
The second one, quickly, why did you wait 10 years to write the book?
Marlon came to my house and asked, the interview was going to be published in Playboy, but I had a lot of other material, including stuff I had written about being on the island. He comes to my house and says to me, Larry, I hope that our time on my island will be private for a while. And I said, gee, Marlon, I already wrote something. Why didn't you say this before? This is that problem you have with before and after. But in his case, I knew the interview was a good interview. As a matter of fact, I'm more proud of this interview than any I've ever done. And I just felt the man has gone to the end of the world to get some privacy. And here I am. He's let me in, and I'm going to tell everybody what it is.
Self-imposed moratorium?
So I gave a 10-year moratorium on it, and he knew about it.
Wait, here's a lady here. I wonder how... Stand up, stand up. Are you proud of this author for doing that?
Of course I am.
It's his mother. His mother.
My boy.
We'll be right back, ladies and gentlemen. Stay with us.
For free
tickets to the Geraldo Show, write Geraldo Tickets, 524 West 57th Street, New York, 10019. Please send a self-addressed stamped envelope or call 212-265-1283.
The shocking story of Florida's Black Widow serial killer's money-motivated murders of her own family on the next Geraldo. I want to try and get as many questions as possible in the shortest time possible, so let's go.
Fred, I was wondering how you acquired your position with the Lennons.
How'd you get hired?
Yes, my uncle Norman Seaman was one of Yoko's oldest friends in New York. He's known her since 1960. My aunt Helen was Sean's nanny. I happened to be graduating from college when they were looking for an assistant, and as luck would have it, my birthday is the day after John's, October 10th. So as far as Yoko was concerned, that was all the qualification I needed.
Hi, my question is for Mary. If you could do it all over again, I mean, growing up, the way you came into the Supremes, would you do it the same way?
I would do it exactly the same way, yes. And want to be Mary Wilson, too.
Yes, hi. My question is also for Mary. I was wondering, I believe I saw you on Joan Rivers or some other talk show when you had your vocal problems or whatever.
Oh, and no, that was
that was not
Mary
you?
Wells.
Okay,
yes.
All right then, sorry.
See, that's the problem, she said. Yeah,
yes.
It's Mary Wilson. Let's also...
Mary, you still performing at all?
I'm still performing. In fact, I have a new album that's coming out very shortly, and I'm very pleased about that.
Oh, what's it going to be called, you know?
I don't know yet.
I'd like to know why Yoko wasn't here today to defend herself.
I'd like to know that too, why I have to talk to Elliot Mintz, who gets paid a lot of money
But
to
why? What's the difference?
Me.
Yoko doesn't want to honor your book with her appearance. We asked.
Well, Mary, did Diana explain to you earlier, you know, when she was leaving, or she just, I don't think she walked away, but did she let you know ahead of time that she was going to leave the group?
That's a kind of long story. I did write about that in my book to
give us the short answer.
Okay, I'll give you a short answer. When it was first decided, we were not aware of it, and it was quite a while before the two of us were made, that fact was made known to us. Yes. I was only surprised. I was surprised, but we had heard it through the media before we actually got it from Diane.
Yes. I just have a comment for Mary. Yes. I think Dream Girl was an excellent book. My mother read it, and I enjoyed it, and she enjoyed it, and you look great.
Thank you.
We'll be right back. We haven't had nearly enough time to get into these conversations with Brando, so I guess I have to buy the book, Conversation with Brando, Lawrence Grobel's latest work. Here's the controversial personal memoir by Frederick Seaman. Just because you don't agree with him doesn't mean there's not a lot of truth in this one, The Last Days of John Lennon. And the Halston book, one that, acted out, played out from Des Moines all the way to New York and Paris and places in between, The Untold Story, simply Halston. I don't know how many of the pictures we've been able to show, but they're quite extraordinary collection of photos in that one. Dream Girl, you know about. Mary Wilson's new one is now in paperback, Supreme Faith, Someday We'll Be Together. Could you sing Someday We'll Be Together?
Now, about that question I was going to ask you.
Come on. Sing the song.
I had to think a lot about writing my book about the wife abuse I had and Florence's rape and a lot of other things. The question about Diane. I had to do a lot of thinking about it. When you wrote your book, everyone asked me, ask him, did you have to really think about things that you wrote? And if you did you sort of vacillate? Because I know I did. I said, well, I'm going to put this in about wife abuse, but no, I won't. Then I would say I will. Did you think about it?
In my book, what's attracted most of the attention are the sexual relations.
No, I'm asking you.
And
what
they were,
you
they were legal, consensual. No one abused anybody. I was surprised that it got as much press as it did. There were a lot of things about the family that are in there that I really did have to think about. And now I'm hearing from relatives saying that they wish I didn't put it in. So, it's really,
you can't
tough.
win.
I'm not sure it's been
win.
a positive experience.
That's the way I feel about it too. I'm not sure, but
all right, now Someday We'll Be Together. One chord, quick.
Oh, no, I'll tell you what. Stop in the name of love before you break my heart. Think it oh. That was my part.
Mary Wilson, Stephen Gaines, Fred Siemens, Lawrence Grobel. Thanks for watching, everybody. See you next time. Bye-bye.